You're looking to be more creative and innovative? And one of the keys to unlocking your potential is an entrepreneurial mindset. I like to say it's mission granted. No one is successful overnight.
Keep on keeping on.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at in the world, and welcome to 31 Days to Pata 2. We are on day 28 of these 31 days. We've been running daily, 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We have been kicking it up here the last few days. We've had some phenomenal guests. We've gained some great insights and some unique tools on how to get unstuck, how to advance your endeavor forward. Today, I'm not going to start with an exercise as I normally would. We have such a great lineup. I want to start with our first guest, and Amy, if you could bring Jennifer Ainolo on, that would be fabulous. Jennifer, I got your last name right finally. It only took me 7 years or something.
Sorry?
It only took me like 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a process.
I didn't know what you were writing about when you put that into a message, and I was like, what is she talking about? I don't get it. Right. I got it. So because I practiced like 20 times saying that.
Good job. Right. How are you?
How are you doing?
Doing okay. It's a quiet morning in New York City. The birds are very loud outside, but that's about it. So
that's a nice thing. Like, you realize you've got birds in New York City now.
Yeah, it's apocalyptic yet nice. You know?
Well, you were in New York on 9/11, were you?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I was technically out of town that day, but was working here throughout that. So yeah,
that was apocalyptic to me. I was there.
What? Yeah.
So I was living down there in Manhattan. So let me ask you some questions. Well, first of all, why don't you share a little bit about what you're doing in regards to women empowerment? Anything you want to share that people can, how they can get a hold of you, because you're doing some amazing things, and then let's talk about how you're changing it up under the current reality.
Yeah, well, you know, fortunately, so there are two halves of my life. One half of which is fine right now because I do a private coaching with female founders. And so that's been a virtual business from the beginning, which is really fortunate right now. So we're fine on that end. And it's really interesting to see which Silicon Valley companies are thriving. I mean, a lot of my clients are. They pick good industries to be in. My Hollywood clients, unfortunately, are shut down. But I guide them through growth and scale and really figuring out how to build their teams the best possible way to thrive. So that's half of my life. And then the other half is really speaking and my virtual incubator, but that also is okay. But the speaking, obviously, we've all been grounded, as you well know, right? So we're not doing that right now. But the world is adapting, right? So we're doing stuff like this. We're doing virtual keynotes. We're, just making it work, really. But everything is, I feel very blessed that things are going okay right now for me. And the women that I work with are extraordinarily powerful, resilient people. So they're figuring it out. And so we're kind of working together to figure that out. But my main mission is to make sure that female founders are resilient in a way that a lot of organizations don't talk about, because there are lots of incubators now for women and programs for women, but not a lot of them dig deep down into the scripts that we have inside. And those are scripts that are handed to us from when we're tiny, right? And a lot of them are unconscious, but we dig them out when we're talking about, having to make hard decisions and be a boss that's going to not be liked after a decision is made, and what that looks like, and being good girls. We're trained to be good girls, and how do we look at all of that, unpack it, and really use it to forge our leadership? So it's a really interesting journey.
Yesterday, there's two things that this, reminds me of. We on Sundays, and on the 31st, which happens to be a Sunday, we have insights from Sean's mom. It's my mother, Noreen. And the female influence is what the part
Yeah.
of it. And she talks a lot about this in real estate. So how when she went into real estate, it was a man's dominated space. And we talked a lot about what she did as a woman to reprogram and how does she show up and behave. And there was a lot of discussion around this. And so, and of course, we do training. I do training, and our Griffin works with training, and specifically around women honing in on behaviors and the same sort of thing. Yesterday we had, I mean, this is important work you're doing, right? But yesterday we had on Risha Grant. And Risha focuses on, and as a speaker, has traveled globally around speaking on unconscious bias.
Yeah, I was watching that.
Oh, so you did what? Okay, great. So let's talk, because that's what you're talking about here. So what can we do to reprogram that? And you know, I'm a big believer that when you see a stage with all men talking about women, that's a problem. But when you see a stage with all women talking about women, that's a problem too. So where's this balance also around getting men more involved so men can start behaving differently and view women in a new kind of light and in a new perspective. Talk to us about this. How do we change our behaviors?
Yeah, well, and I think there's similar conversations. So you're right on target. It's really about, from the male perspective, it's really about listening. Listen to what we're saying and get that our perspective is different, and don't invalidate it from your viewpoint. And I think that's one of the toughest pieces. That's why you see panels, right? You see panels of men talking about women, and we're not in the room. It's like, wait a second. So it's really, you know, it's so easy to be kind of stuck in our viewpoint, but unaware that we are. That's what unconscious bias is. And so it's stopping and saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm hearing something I'm unfamiliar with. Let me take a second. Let me listen to what you're saying. And it's what I've started, you know, this has been referred to in various pieces of media, but it's that radical empathy of, I have no idea what this person's experience is like. Let me take a second. Let me get out of the way and get my viewpoint out of the way and just hear what they have to say. And then we can learn something. So it's really that. It's getting over in the other person's shoes and just listening to what is going on over there and realize that you might not be right about it. Right. So we're always striving for the objective truth, but it's always colored by our experiences. So that's kind of the way I look at it. It's all about lenses, right? What lens are you looking through?
It's also awareness. So like, how does someone gain awareness that there's even something that there's an issue with the behavior or with the situation, whatever it is? Because it seems to me, working literally with thousands and thousands of women business builders, and then also lots of different men and women interactions and testing and running experiments on what we can do to overcome whatever those unconscious biases are. It seems to me that men, women do not even have a consciousness that there's something not right about how, or they could be better, or their lives could be better. And if they were to become more aware of their behaviors and actions, that they would improve their value as a human, something Gary works on with the entrepreneurial mindset constantly. How do we get people to even be aware that, you know, there's something to think about here and not just go through their lives blindly, not aware?
Well, it actually takes, I think a lot of it comes down to ego. Like, where is your ego in the way of your listening to what's going on? How do you step outside of that and find out, right? And so you know, it's something I talk about in the manifesto that I wrote, because I'm working on a book about this. And everything that I work on with women is called what I call self-directed empowerment, right? So the world talks about empowerment most of the time as something I'm going to give you, right? I'm going to go to India and empower young girls. And so it's this setup of, I'm going to give that to you. But the problem is, if we follow the logic, if I can give it to you, I can take it away from you, right? So that's not a sustainable thing. It's a gift. And that doesn't work. That's not a long-term solution. So I started looking at how do we create empowerment, much like renewable energy, right? It lives inside of you already. So how do we keep it going? And so there's kind of a 3-step process I use that can apply to this as well. And
I'm going to write this down. We'll go to the vision board because this is good.
Awesome.
I like it.
I've been excited about this.
Okay.
So step one is really to check your lens, right? How are you seeing the context of a situation? And so it's like I was just saying, there's one side, the other side, and then the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? So that's the first step. Really check where you're coming from, how your viewpoint is coloring the situation and your understanding of it, right? So that's the first step. The second step is to look for where there's a zero-sum game happening, right? And so for people who are not familiar with that, zero-sum is like a poker game. It's winner take all, right? I win, you lose, that's it. There's no opportunity for any kind of win-win. And so most of the time in the world, we talk about that, right? Like the quote is, if men win, women lose, and vice versa. And so if we move past that and we start looking at a win-win scenario, we can start to come up with better solutions that work for everybody. It's about workability, right? So that's our step two.
Okay.
And then step three is really about taking responsibility. What can you take responsibility for in the conversation? What is your contribution to how you're showing up inside of this dialogue? And then from there, you can actually take steps forward together and shift communities, right? So, but it takes that first step of really changing that lens in order to be able to do that. So, I've been working this over and over and over again, and we're doing it in the virtual incubator, Imperia, where we have women from 17 countries on 6 continents. And so there are a lot of lenses coming in there to this conversation. And we're looking at, okay, well, maybe in your country, it's illegal to do X, Y, and Z. And so how do we work around that to make sure that you're okay? And, how are things going right now? How are infrastructures working right now with COVID exploding through Africa right now? So it's a lot of that, of checking, okay, who are you today in the face of this situation? And how can we shift something so you've got some power about it? So that's kind of the framework that we've been using over and over and over again. And I think it's really effective.
It seems like to me, and it's beautiful. I like, again, 3 steps. So it's like Risha's 3 steps, less is more.
Yeah.
Thanks for getting those up there, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
This is harder. It's hard. It's harder, than to do than to talk about. Because people's behaviors are tied to this, right? And so how we look at it is the difference between enablement and empowerment.
Exactly.
Enabling people doesn't help them long term. In fact, it can keep them dependent upon you. And so a lot of people like that, right? The enabling move versus the empowerment move. And it's what I hear you saying is the same thing that I believe strongly. It's giving people 100% agency for their lives so that they have 100% agency on what they can do, which is what you're talking about. And so.
Yeah, I mean, look.
That's very different. This is a very different approach than like 99% of all the programming I see out around the world, which is very much of an enablement model versus truly empowering people to get 100% agency. What's the response from, your funders and so forth around this? And, what are they thinking?
Well, here's what's interesting. So here's something that is a very typical way that women approach business. So I haven't approached funders yet because I wanted to prove that it worked first.
Okay.
And that is something that we tend to do, right? So we kind of get our ducks in a row first. I also, for myself, this is my lifelong project, right? As you get this, right? This is what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life.
Right.
And I wanted to experiment first and see, A, if I was right about what I thought, and B, like what it needed. And I wanted the women in the program to tell us what it needed to be. So, but here's the great thing. Now I have a track record of successes that are happening around the world where I can say, hey, look, this is working.
Right.
And P.S. we've been virtual from day one, so this has not affected anything, right? We're doing live calls every week and keeping everybody going. But yeah, so now it's time to go have that funding conversation and really figure out what what funding mechanism makes sense, right? Because we've got for-profits, nonprofits. It's going to be sort of a mixed funding.
Sure. But I think that the difference is here, and this is important, is, and we've got a research paper that's been being worked on for 6 months. It's going to highlight the same thing, which is what we call it 100% agency. That's same thing, but different terms. But it's about empowerment. And what we're finding is it's taken 12 years for people to wake up that, wait a minute, this isn't really about business building. This is about transforming lives. And we help people reach their full potential. The business building is the vehicle or the mechanism to get people to reach their full potential. It's a flip-flop of everything. So we've been, all of a sudden, we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We're getting it ourselves. That you're on the leading edge for this. You have a potential to be like Risha in this situation. You already are speaking and engaging, but to be able to get this book out and then promote those 3 steps is really just you're positioned so well to shift people's thinking, and now is the time to do that.
Thank you.
How much longer till the book's out, Jennifer?
Pardon?
How much longer till the book's out?
I'm giving myself 6 months.
That's strong, man. That's going to be interesting to see.
Well, I'm not traveling right now, so I have the time.
I don't think we'll be traveling anytime soon, Jennifer. I've had a couple friends take videos as they're going because they had to travel, or they felt they had to travel anyway. And no way am I going through any of these fogging machines.
No, I'm just not doing that.
Are you kidding me? I get uncomfortable when they do the plane with that fogger. Oh.
I don't want the stress of the rest of it, right? It's not, I could deal with the fog machine, but dealing with other passengers right now, maybe not. New York is bad enough, so.
You got enough stress. Well, Jennifer, you keep up this great work. And where can we, okay, we got all your information here where people can reach you if I want to get in touch with you. You're coaching women specifically. It's about empowering women to reach their full potential and through their businesses. And you're working on a book. What's the name of the book? Tentative?
No, TBD on that. But the manifesto, they can actually get now. Here it is. No one is coming is the manifesto. The
manifesto, and they can find that when they go to your website or we'll put that up.
It has the 3 steps in it. So that was the precursor because I wanted to get something out there because I saw which way the world was going.
Yeah, you did that a while ago though. This was last year.
It was it was October 2018.
Yeah, year before. Yeah,
so about a year.
Remember, it's very nice and. I'm just glad to see you're doing well. I mean, you must miss that office of yours going there. Good timing or not.
It's funny. So the office is in the World Trade Center, and
what floor are you on?
85th.
85th.
It's a beautiful view. It's a gorgeous spot, but it's the equivalent of being in an airplane. It's canned air, and they're like, "Yeah, come on in. We're keeping it clean," and I'm like, I don't think so.
I was thinking, gosh, just what the heck? Because that space is amazing.
It's gorgeous. And next time you're in town, we have to obviously have lunch up there because the view is just, you can't not feel like the queen of the universe up in up there because you look out upon your domain like, wow. And that's actually what solidified the thinking for the incubator that, okay, we can do this. I'm looking out at Queens where most of the world population has converged. And I'm like, this is doable. We can do this. And it kind of was birthed from there.
So great. Jennifer, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. We'll keep you informed. We're gonna keep doing some form of what we're doing going forward. It's not clear yet, but we'll be making some announcements before we close this down in 3 days from today, which is kind of amazing.
You've done it every day. Look, for you to power through this and beyond every day, it's awesome. I love it.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Take care.
Great work. You too.
You too.
All right. See that? It's about 100% agency, your own self-empowerment. You have to do it yourself and find that internal engine that you have inside of your intestines that keep you going, that gets you to where you want to go, to make that dream not just an idea you sleep on, but something you act upon. Do it today. Who's our next guest? Joe.
What do you know?
I'm so excited to meet you.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is like catching up after a couple of decades, bro. So I'm really amazed. Yeah, no.
Because we saw each other at a international visual practitioner conference in San Francisco a while.
The David Sibbett World. Yeah, exactly.
Joe, you know, you are somebody who has influenced my life in a big way, and that, you know, we started something many moons ago, and I'm not sure where it's at now. I don't think it's not operating, but Digital Clubhouse, which used your methodologies around digital storytelling, and you are like the father of digital storytelling, and maybe you could talk a little bit about this.
I feel more like the great grandfather.
Right, I'm the father.
Jesus.
I got gray hair.
You know, I got a lot of offspring out in the world.
I got a story for you, though, Joe. Okay, before we go into this, I got a story for you, because you influenced my life, and there's something I want to apologize to you for that I didn't know. You know, I don't know if you know, but I have an 18-month-old son. His name is Zane. And, he's changed my life. I didn't know much. And I don't know if you remember, but when we were building the Digital Clubhouse on 55 Broad Street in New York, we were staying in a brownstone in Brooklyn. And Massimo was probably around the same age Zane is now.
Yeah, he was a little tiny turkey. You what?
You know, I said to you something along the lines of "never have kids. What are you doing having kids?" You got upset at me.
Yeah, I probably did kick your ass around that. Yeah,
and I was like, "Whoa, I upset Joe. I don't really want to. That wasn't my intent." I apologize for that, Joe. You were right, and I did. It took me 20-some years to figure that out, but now I know what you knew then. Let
me tell you, if you called me when he was 15. I would have said, you were right. So, you know, raising children is a wondrous, wonderful thing. And now I have a 24-year-old Massimo who's
23, because I think he was like
24. Yeah. And he's out of college, and he's his own dude, and it's a beautiful thing. And he's a chip off the old block in a lot of ways. So I'm
I just want to apologize for that. And
it's about time, Sean. Come on, man. I had to wait 22 years for that.
Well, it just was something that's been on my mind ever since. I'm like, gosh, whenever I talk to Joe, and I didn't know it'd be like this, I got to apologize because I thought of you. All right, let's go back to our subject here. Digital storytelling. Talk to us a little bit about this and what you're doing, and what are you up to now?
Yeah, I mean,
what is the digital storytelling?
Just, you know, as you know, Sean, but back in the day, in the mid-90s, many of us were close to the tech industry of the Bay Area, and I ran a theater company that was interested in storytelling. I mean, in all sorts of storytelling in the broadest sense. As a result of being close to the tech industry, we kind of began to learn about the tools that were being developed. One of them was the ability to edit video on a computer, which seems so passé here in 2020. But, you know, back in the early 90s, it was like, whoa, how could you possibly ever do that? So because we kind of got to ride on that edge, as you remember, we sort of were interested in how the family album, the photos we collect, meets the digital age. And we're interested in the way that people tell stories. I have a background in, you know, playwriting and theater, and I wanted to help people do this. I've always had an interest in community-based art making, meaning something for everybody to do, not just the specialist experts, but something for everybody to do. All of that kind of came together, and without explaining more, you know, what digital storytelling was a form of a short film, usually 2 to 4 minutes in length, narrated by a normal person, an ordinary person who conceives of a short film first with a narration script, something they say, and then they put the images on it. And the way we approach it is we're teaching digital video in the way that people might have taught typing in the 20th century, right? Because we understand screen literacy is a kind of literacy, just like reading and writing literacy, that separates people economically. If you can read and write, you go up the ladder. If you can't, you stay down below the ladder. And if the same with screen literacy, I mean, the ability to be on screen, to find images, to make images, you're really good at that. Suddenly you're able to cross a lot more borders economically and move forward. So So we treated it mainly as a way to help people express themselves, but we've also understood the potential of it as part of the way people, are part of the media world, the screen culture, the social media world that we're all part of, that they can compose into multimedia and do that. As a result, what happened is that it sort of exploded all over the world as a movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's hardly any place you can't go. You can find somebody doing this kind of form, this digital storytelling form. It's not video for watching on TV. It's not even, sort of like the way you think of media production as about the skill set of refinement. It's a kind of first blush impression. So we put these workshops on. We do projects with 70 to 90 organizations of scales up to hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. And we move through the world, basically training our competition so that we can, kind of feel good about the access of this to as many people as possible. I'd like everybody on the planet to make a digital story, Sean. It's like I ain't done. Everybody's done one at least. And we've got a long way to go. We got a long way to go, but we've helped tens of thousands of folks. And the only other thing is my staff is now national. Got an office in Denver, got people scattered here and there, an office in Toronto. So we move around the world pretty easily. Got a lot of kind of mix of staff and contractors that I can put on the ground whenever they need to be, wherever they need to be. What are we doing? We're surviving, COVID-19. That's what we're doing right now.
Are you moving to more remote training? Or are you trying? You've written a book. What's the book you've written?
Well, I've written a couple books, right? I'm in the 6th edition of Digital Storytelling, what was called Capturing Lives and Creating Community, right? But I thought we should update the subtitle with the 6th edition, which came out in March. And I was right. It came out on March 15th. It was called Story Work for Urgent Times. And I think I caught the right moment for urgency. What the other book I wrote is called 7 Stages, Story and the Human Experience. The main thing we obviously have codified a sort of branded methodology, but like a lot of folks coming from where we came in Silicon Valley, it's been an open source approach from the beginning.
Right.
We sell a couple of books, but we mainly encourage people to kind of do this themselves. And in the online space, because we're technologists first, right? We've been doing this online for a long time. We've been doing it, the day Adobe Connect was created, we said, we could do something with Adobe Connect, and then, GoToMeeting and now Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been teaching on that platform for about a decade. And so it was actually pretty easy for us to switch gears and go completely virtual.
Right.
However, we lost a couple $100,000 worth of work instantaneously, like a lot of people. It's everything. Yeah, everybody going, yeah, I know what that feels like. But I think we've turned it around pretty well. And I think, oddly, we're a very entrepreneurial kind of organization that looks for work, and all of my staff, we're weird in terms of the way we're structured. We all get paid the same. Me, I'm like,
of course, I love it.
So we all get paid the same. We all pretty much have the same job description, get work and deliver it, right? And so, I think we're going to look a little bit more like a traditional nonprofit, because we recognize there's a lot of civic need on the global level for the therapeutic and kind of emotional holding of people as they go through this crisis. And social isolation, there are 3 waves of this thing, right? There's the health wave, there's the economic wave, but there's also a mental health wave. And New York Times this week, 1/3 of the United States is experiencing severe, or moderate to severe anxiety. That being said, knowing that people are paying attention to your story and you have a way to put it out there is really important.
Joe, you've been doing this a long time, and I know that I've been doing entrepreneurship intentionally, education work now a little over 12 years. It might be 13, 14. traveled to 72 countries.
I know. I'm really impressed. I looked at what you've been doing. It's amazing.
Lots of really complicated environments, and it's always, super rewarding, work. But within that context, I started finding myself about 2 years ago, just getting burnt out. I was traveling. For a number of years in a row, I traveled 330 plus days a year. And so I know you're not traveling that much, but you do travel and you do all this work. How do you stay, you've been doing the same thing pretty much, there's a repetition to it for all this time. How do you stay motivated? How do you stay fresh? How do you stay inspired?
The last 2 weeks I've been helping groups in Croatia and Serbia tell stories about their cities, about the kind of stories behind their cities. I think I have the best job in the world, Sean. My job is to listen. Jennifer was just talking about men learning to listen. I think I'm working on it. But listening to people and being witness to the variety of human experience, I think is very, powerful. And every one of these stories, as we try to work them, are kind of, soul pieces that allow us to connect in a much deeper way. When we do our work right, people are speaking from the center of themselves. And when you hear that, we did a screening of these 20, 30 stories yesterday. You just wake back up, and it doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel old. And there's always something there to learn, because there's a lot of complexity in the kinds of things we're doing. Mm-hmm. That being said, that the road we're on a 63-year-old body is not small. So I'm sort of enjoying, waking up in the morning, doing a workshop in Europe, because their afternoon is our California early morning. Right. And then by the end of the day, I'm doing a workshop in Hong Kong, with Hong Kong students. Right. Where I'm doing the same thing I would have done, except I don't have to get on that goddamn plane and suffer the European jet lag or the China jet lag, and it well. So the irony is, maybe this is like my best time. I can do this thing into a screen. You're doing it pretty damn well, but I can do this all day long. Except for I have to do yoga every day, and I ran my miles this morning even before I got here, because I can't even be present without a cup of coffee and that. But I think really it's about what the depth of connection I get to have with people. We as humans have to be connected. And oddly, in times like this, when we're mortally afraid, we need each other. And these connections, as I know because you talk to a lot of people, these connections hold us together. Mm-hmm. And this is important work to me, and I've trained a lot of people to do it, but I always start with the idea that, holding space for all of the woundedness we have is critical. What I remember about you, Sean, was that you had the miraculous ability to turn the sour note of your dyslexia into this amazing business. Yeah. And I've had the fortune working, a lot of emphasis, even at the clubhouse, was with differently abled people. That's right. But, to me, it's like people need to be held through processes where somebody says, instead of that being a deficit, that's an asset. You're going to take what you learn by being forged through complicated experience, being made to feel bad, being made, to worry about one's worth or one's, acceptance. And you're going to turn it into something even more powerful, because, as you said, in your intestines is precisely where that energy of resolve comes from. And that's also anger, and that's also fear, but if you can turn it, you'll be whole and healthy, and you won't burn out, because you'll know you're servicing, that person that you've always been. You're everybody you ever were in your life. All those stories are inside you. Yeah. And if you hold on to it, it works out. So
That's powerful words, man. I think that, and I appreciate you bringing up like the gift of dyslexia, right? It's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And to turn it around into that gift is something that I think what I guess my question around this, because and maybe it's a question you should be asking me, I don't know, but the question in my mind is how do, like, there's a lot of people with dyslexia, there's a lot of people with challenges, there's a lot of people who have different issues. I've been recently working in refugee settlements, and and it's transformed my life again, right? It's just, I'll never ever be the same, right? Just a sidewalk, running water, a light switch works.
But it's the same thing. I mean, if you think about it, Sean, in our heads, we can say, from where I stand when I started, I don't stand a chance. Or we can say, God damn it, because I'm put in this situation, I'm going to fight my way out, and I'm going to be that much stronger and that much more, kind of tougher to be able to get through things. I think all of us have that feeling of inadequacy. We are fearful that even I work with a lot of PhDs, a lot of professionals, and all of them suffer imposter syndrome. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're like, you've climbed several mountains and you stood and looked out, and you're still feeling like you're not a mountain climber. You're not worthy. It seems to me that the healing part of this is listening to the stories of what woundedness you have that you haven't processed fully. Now, that's why therapists make $125, $100, $200 an hour, is that they know how to just sit there and allow you to do that. It's not magic, but it does take some discipline to just let people work this stuff out. So story work for us is that, creating of that space so that people can do those stories. That having been said, there's a lot of new resources to help different people go up those ladders. And without those resources, they don't stand a chance. I mean, there's a lot of kids that don't get through a diagnosis of some learning disorder, and they end up being the people that their life is difficult all the way through. Whatever fortune you have, I'm glad you had it. I know you had parents that fought for you. I know you had, schools that might have given you a few of those resources, maybe not enough, but the point is, I think all of us are there, whether you're doing it for the economic, ladder that they might be able to climb. It's the same attitude. And I hear you teaching it, is your story matters. First of all, you matter.
That's right.
You're important in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, there's some stories inside you that, instead of feeling like they're badges of dishonor, are badges of honor. They're badges of your belonging to a community of struggling humans of a particular kind. So, to me, I'm glad you made it where you are.
Me too. My mother's happy too. So that's
I know she is. And I'm glad you're a dad now, because the cycle of this is always teaching. And it's amazing what a small child can teach you, right?
Believe me, I'm learning everything new. Every day is like a new lesson, and it's so refreshing. And my creativity is boosted up in a lot of ways, because all of a sudden I try to look at the world through his eyes, and I get down on my hands and knees, and I'm like looking at what he's seeing, and it's incredible. And so I feel also like I'm complete now that we've had our conversation, because I feel like I probably said that to some other people and upset them, and I was clearly clueless in those days. Let me go back to something here, because when we were doing this, the digital clubhouse, I was also working with Senator Vasconcellos. Do you remember Senator Vasconcellos? Yeah,
sure. Good job.
He was a self-esteem guy. He was all about self-esteem building. And Jack Canfield, this is when Jack Canfield was first starting to write his Chicken Soup for the Souls. That the digital storytelling, in my mind, while it's great to get that out, it built the self-esteem of the people who were going through the process, because it was almost like starting a business, but easier, because they can do it, and then it has an end date, and then there's the creation at the end, and all of a sudden they're transformed, and so now they feel like, well, I could do that, I can do anything, kind of thing. Is that continuing? Are you seeing that kind of self-esteem building?
Oh yeah, I mean, and again, yes, because I think anytime you mark your life with, whether it's you write or you perform or you do something to make an artifact out of your own experience, you feel better. Creativity matters.
Mm-hmm.
In a kind of work we're doing, the first blood, if you were just saying, tell me a story about growing up with dyslexia, well, Sean, you would go into that story and you would have a kind of safe bunch of things, but we wouldn't really know what the soul space of that is. So the esteem is that I could talk a little bit about what was really hard about that and position the way I'm telling it as if I control that narrative. Back in the day, I didn't feel in control at all. So the esteem, I think, comes from that sense of I have agency over at least one narrative. Well, if I have agency around that narrative, particularly hard ones, then I can have agency around this other stuff. I mean, most of our work is in trauma-informed spaces. We built out a whole wing around gender-based violence in communities. And
are you working in Zambia?
We were Zambia. We didn't work but it's interesting. We've certainly worked in South Asia. We've worked all over Africa because there are NGOs that are helping young women get past the histories of male supremacist issues. And
totally.
But to me, the point there is that sense of esteem comes from I may have been a victim, but it's not my identity. I was somebody that was victimized is a different identity. I still have power in these situations. To me, that negotiation is the same for all human beings, because we're all survivors of something. We're all survivors of some sense of inadequacy or failure or just like I said, mortal vulnerability right in the moment that makes us kind of feel like, wow, how do I hold that? Well, you tell stories about it. That's how you hold a difficult experience. And then anybody doing PTSD with a soldier returning from home will say the same thing. Got to get them to talk about it and to be very gentle about it and let them say what they're ready to talk about when they're ready to talk it. Don't force anything. Listen some more, listen. Let them get to the point where they say, what this is really about. And when somebody does that, your heart cracks open, their heart cracks open, and you're human in the most fundamental way.
So beautiful. So beautiful. One of the things I've tried for a while with you is to try to figure out how to collaborate, right? And create these stories. And we have, over 130,000 now business builders have gone through our program, which is just, I scratch my head. And how did that happen? Now we have bigger goals because we're going virtual. Mm-hmm. But there's so many stories in there. Sometimes I'm like, Joe Lambert, we need to get Joe here. How the heck do we get Joe? In Zambia, we have a Women's Entrepreneurship Community Center and Accelerator Incubator. Mm-hmm. Over 12,000 women have Zambian women. It's in Kuku Compound, which is a slum area within Lusaka. Mm-hmm. I don't know what we can do, but there's something here that I would like us to be more intentional about, to capture those stories of miraculous transformation. And when I was in those refugee settlements, and when I work in those settlements, which we're continuing to do, we're transforming lives in ways that I've never ever seen before, like big time, like huge, that keeps you going. It's the same thing you're talking about. But their stories are what's incredible, because, they might be Congolese. Both parents were killed. They were trying to be recruited by the military. They somehow escaped. Now they're adults, and they're going, and now they started a hospital, and a mobile hospital, and now they're helping out the community with a mobile hospital. They're moving into other countries, so they're replicating. Mm-hmm. These kind of things, these stories that make it real, make it humanize it, particularly refugees. I think people just don't understand that they're humans, man, and that they want the same things we all want, and in many cases of no fault of their own, they're in a situation that is awful. And so somehow getting those stories, and I don't know what we can do, Joe. You have any ideas right now? What we could do?
Well, I mean, one is you should listen and see where the stories are already been made. All my experience, participatory media practices emerge, meaning somebody with their cell phone camera takes pictures and sends them somewhere. Well, that's a form of storytelling that they might also put words to it. You know, all these amazing music videos that come out of, you know, kind of what you would think is very marginal communities, but they're knocking them out. So one will argue that a lot of that work's done by those communities, for those communities, without anybody's help at all. That we don't speak maybe their, you know, their language, or we don't know what they call it because it's in their own language. You know, that's that. So, you know, one is the stories are emerging all the time. Practices like ours related to organizational activities can be very simple, as in write into a simple template, meaning in whatever language you're doing it in, you create sort of like one of those fill in the blank poems, like a Mad Lib poem.
Okay.
And just have them write into a Mad Lib poem structure on talking about some specific things about their experience and identity using language that they would be familiar. You know, Amy put it, either find George Ella Lyons, Lyons, and her I Am From poem, and put that into the feed so that people can see that. An example like that is you could make digital stories out of a poem that's that simple, and then translate it and put it in. And then all you need is tell them, you know, hold your phone up and read the thing you wrote, or have your friend hold the phone up, or lean it against the wall.
Right. So just don't complicated is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, in essence, what we're talking about is two different things. Is like a process of working through a story, like crafting a story, is an education process. And so integrating your work with those educational processes that might have things that are journalistic or creative writing or some other kind of documentary process, you need to find those partners in each of the places you go, because they'll exist. There'll be a local campus somewhere that has people doing journalistic practice about that refugee camp. Somebody's doing it.
Somebody is, for sure.
Yeah, and then figure out kind of these other participatory mechanisms. And then just like you learn to do visual facilitation, you know, there's a 3, 4, 5 year entrainment that we do with professionals, right, to get them used to being able to work in these complex situations and facilitate in a way that, you know, always kind of calibrates it right, calibrates the expectations appropriately for what this group of people can do, given you're only giving them for 2 hours or 10 hours,
right,
15 hours. And so you calibrate all that to get a result that they can still have a kind of the same feeling you were talking about of, wow, I did my story. There it is. I Am From poem from George Ella Lyons.
That's awesome.
The idea is you really just want people to feel that their voice is heard and they're represented. They don't, whether their picture is represented or not, doesn't matter. We do a lot of work where you can't. We did work with Afghan women writers, and we couldn't have even their voices, because just talking with authority about what their experience was put them at risk. So that's the other thing in a lot of these communities. You have to know what you're doing so that you don't expose people to problems, because things like saying what you don't like about the refugee camp could be dangerous to you. It could be problematic to you. So even the idea of what's safe to talk about, what's not safe to talk about, knowing, you know, what are things will come up and who's going to emotionally support you. If you compartmentalize loss and you're still at risk completely, and somebody's telling you to go ahead and feel those feelings full on, well, where are you going to be tomorrow when I'm having a nervous breakdown because you ignited the fire of that emotional space that I had locked out because I got to show up today. I have to go get water. I have to do whatever. So you also have to know all of those wonderful skills that people who are good international development support people do. And, you know, the final thing is always find the local allies, as I know you have. And, you know, the local allies need to be the champions. They need to be the heroes of this work, not you.
That's right.
You're just bringing a methodology that's useful. And if you're doing your work right, they'll figure out what the hell to do with your methodology, and that will be their story, not yours. So
I mean that's such an important comment right there, and this goes back to what Jennifer was talking about.
Exactly.
100% agency, self-empowerment, where I've gotten to the point where I don't even do the major presentations. I don't do the trainings. It's all localized. So it's hyper local context. And that way, particularly in many cases, I'm the only white guy in the entire place. And, you know, it's so much better if you localize it. And I call it, it's hyper localization. And I totally agree with this. And
yeah. Well, and if you went to our website, if you went to storycenter.org and you looked at, you know, our kind of ethical material in our, you know, when we work with custom clients, we have to talk to them about ethics. And we say the exact same thing, you know, well-being for the individuals first, but local relevancy is right behind it. It's like, who are we doing this for and why? If you have a big thing that you need as your outside agency with lots of money, but the local people don't need it, we ain't playing with you, because we're not, you know, we have an expression for that at Story Center. We call that the missionary position, and we don't mean it in a good way. Let me tell you.
Right. That's a nice way of saying things. Yeah.
That's a nice way of saying.
Very nice.
Maybe not that nice, but I think the joke
pretty much stopped swearing.
Starts with it. Yes, exactly.
Because of Zane, I swore a couple times, and all of a sudden the kid's saying the word, and I'm like,
yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so much trouble.
Yes, the parrot that you go, who taught you that word? You know, my ex-wife would say, you taught him another word today, didn't you? I didn't mean to teach him another word today.
You're having a conversation.
But yes, you're right. He seems to have remembered that word. His vocabulary did expand. I'm so sorry about that. Joe. I must have been having a bad moment. It's so great to see you, Sean. I'll let you get to your next guest.
You keep up the great work. I'm going to keep promoting. And you're still doing morning, or Joe, what's Joe? Sorry.
The Digital Diner?
Digital Diner with Joe. You still doing that?
Well, in fact, you know, it's all about empowerment. In June, it becomes PJ's Diner, because my colleague Parul Wadhwa, who is a VR artist from New Delhi, who is now our artist in residence, she's been doing it with me, and she's going to sort of take it over. So PJ's Diner, Joe's Digital Diner might make another return, I'm sure, someplace. But PJ's Diner will keep going, you know, at least once a month going forward. I just have, you know, I have just too much going on. So
life has gotten harder here on this end as well. And that's good. Can keep having a really, you know, keep putting a dent in the universe, Joe. You're doing such great work, and it's my great pleasure to have worked with you, collaborated, and to be your friend.
Same to you, boss. Be well. Take care.
You too, my friend.
See you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for getting up early.
All right. Bye.
Wow. Oh, man. So digital storytelling as a way to connect with people, to empower yourself, to share your story. What amazing opportunities people have. And that's also a great way to be marketing and promoting yourself. We have so many different channels you can broadcast on. I encourage you to look up and explore digital storytelling and all the links Joe sent, and create your own story. All right, I think we have one other guest here. Gary, thanks for your patience today.
Sean.
Wow. Huh?
No problem, Sean. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I always love having you here. You make my day.
Awesome.
You're going to be doing I think you're our most visited guest now, officially. Like, it's our third time?
Yeah, love it.
You're our most visited
love
guest.
It.
Great.
Yeah, we're like brothers from another mother.
Right. Now, you're going to be doing something, the Entrepreneurial Mindset 101. You're going to be doing something soon?
So we do like webinars. We're still tinkering around with that. I did one yesterday. But we do about once a month, just kind of like, you know, what is an entrepreneurial mindset? How can you embrace it? How can you not only embrace it in yourself, but in your children, your students, your workforce? I mean, that's really kind of what we're trying to do, like help people understand what is an entrepreneurial mindset, put some structure around it. But also, Sean, helping people understand what I would call like the entrepreneurial mindset imperative.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you get it. It's just like the employee mindset is gone. It's like it's like now maladaptive, right? The employee mindset is now maladaptive. It once served us well, 1950s, 1960s. You sell yourself to the large corporation. You got lifetime employment. You get a house and a boat and pension, and life is great. But that's gone. And I'm not advocating everyone learn how to start a business necessarily. But I am saying that everyone needs to learn how to be innovative and entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. And I'm also saying,
we frame that as become a more valuable human, right?
That's what I'm saying. The same thing, Sean. Like, you got to figure out how to make yourself useful to other humans, right? But what people don't realize, and this is where we're going to sort of like baby step into mindset stuff. People don't realize, like, we have these deeply held assumptions in our mind that we don't even know we have, right? And they're driving our behavior. But we don't even know it. We don't even know they're there. And some of those assumptions are as follows. How do we learn how to be useful to other humans? We do that in this guided process called formalized education. And the underlying assumption within those systems of education are that you are going to work in an established organization where the useful thing has already been determined by someone else.
Right.
Long ago, someone smarter than you, someone more creative than you, someone more privileged than you, what the hell ever. Somebody long ago figured out what was useful. And you're going to fulfill a predetermined, often insanely well-defined role. Right?
Yeah.
So within those systems, like, there's zero opportunities for you to figure out how to be useful on your own. You're just inculcated into an existing system. But the other part of it is, Sean, so like, the amount of value that you can deliver to the world is also constrained. Right? You're an acorn and you're stuck in a little window box. You're never going to get to be, and I heard you talking about it with previous guests, you're never going to get to be who you're supposed to be, is sitting in that window box. And you said something to me that really, as if we even needed this, but like, I so bond with you over this. Like, entrepreneurship isn't about business.
Right.
It's about unleashing potential. It's about optimizing engagement, right? Most of the vast majority of humans on this earth are not engaged in their work. The number's like 87%, Sean.
I know.
I gave a lecture.
They don't like their work. They hate their work. They don't like their work. The number's astronomical in the U.S. I'm sure it's even bigger in the outside.
The U.S. is the most engaged, with about 2/3, about 67% are not engaged, right? Yeah. I gave a lecture in Johannesburg last year. I said, like, how come the whole world isn't freaking out about this statistic, this colossal waste of human potential? And the guy politely raised his hand. He said, they're not freaking out because they're not engaged.
Right.
But you think about it, but then you switch, Sean, and you look at the entrepreneur, they're like hyper engaged.
Yeah.
Right? You and I aren't talking about, oh, thank God it's Friday. We're like, thank God it's Monday.
Right. How can I get caught up on the weekend?
Exactly. It's like Sunday morning. I'm on my phone. I'm writing a blog. I'm just like, I'm
Yeah.
But here's the linchpin. Go ahead, Sean. I'll stop.
Yeah. I mean, this has been a constant thing. And what I love about you is just your passion for this. Like, you are fired up, man. I love it. And entrepreneurship, it took us a while to figure out, we're not helping people build businesses. We're helping people reach their full potential. It literally took us a few years. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, we're not really helping them build a business. We're helping them reach their full potential. And this is our vehicle. And so when that happened, Gary, it kind of opened this new way of pattern, way of life. But there's also a reprogramming that comes with this. And I think a lot of what the show has done, and when we look going forward, it's like, it's almost like we got to continually have this, how to reboot your brain, like, and it never ends, right? Because you're constantly having to relearn, and you don't know what you don't know while you still know more than you know, And so the question is how to like get those to match where people, and it's the same thing I was talking about with Jennifer Lanolo. Yesterday we had Risha Grant. She's a specialist in unconscious bias. It seems to me we just all need like a reboot of the brain to not, maybe not all of us, but many of us, and we could all probably use it. But how do we help those people, the majority of people? I think another 2.1 million unemployed today, announced today, something like this.
Yeah,
which means we're getting close. You're going to get close to 50 million. I'll bet you unemployed. And those, to me, those people. Those 50 million are there and need some help to become more entrepreneurial in their thinking, not to start a business, but to be more valuable humans. How do we help people to think more entrepreneurially and be open to that even?
Yeah. Okay. So go to the vision board for a second, Sean. Get to the vision board for a second. Let's try something fun here. Okay.
The vision board.
Okay. So we're going to make a simple XY axis, right?
Uh-huh. XY.
And so the vertical.
Like this? How do I do that?
No, an XY graph. An XY graph. Right?
A graph. Okay. Graph. I got a graph.
Right. Like yeah. Scratch that. It's just like a vertical and a horizontal, right? Correct. Okay. So the vertical, which I believe is the y-axis, I always get those mixed up, but whatever. The vertical. Okay. So let's just put this word next to the vertical called usefulness.
Usefulness.
Right? Yeah. My friends call this Schoenger's law.
Okay. Schoenger's
law. The horizontal. Right, so the horizontal is like the volume.
Like how much?
Yes. Like the number of people you're useful to.
Okay, number.
Right, and I Sean, one of the things I want to point out, and I think you'll vibe with this is, I kind of steer away from business terms.
Yeah,
like son of a bitch, they're not markets, they're humans.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not customers, they're not segments, they're human beings. Right? Okay. So that's why I don't even want to use the word value here. I'm like, usefulness is the most, it's the most profound thing. Okay. So where's a brain surgeon on this graphic? Right? Yeah, number of humans. That's a better way of saying it. Okay, so if you look at a brain surgeon, for example, a brain surgeon is high and to the left.
Right up here, like right here, we got a brain surgeon, right?
There's a brain surgeon, right? You're really, really useful to like 5 people. Right? But then you're like Beyonce, and you're like 99 cents useful to like a bazillion people. You're like so far low and to the right.
Yeah.
Right? You're selling 99 cents to a lot of people. And I'm using that for a metaphor, right?
Totally.
But the point is that the work you and I are immersed in is like, get on up out of here and figure out how to make yourself more useful to more humans. Like high and to the right, brother. High and to the right.
Yeah, like over here. This is where we want
to go. You're just pushing. Like there's so much information available to you now. You're not constrained by a degree. You can't say, well, I don't have a diploma. I don't have a high enough degree. I don't have to write this or to write that. Like that doesn't apply anymore. You can learn. There's so much information for free. You learn by trying stuff. You learn, you get an Audible subscription. You're constantly learning, constantly looking for problems to solve, constantly trying things. Figure out how to make yourself more useful to more people. That's how you'll change your mindset. You can't change your mindset by reading something. Yeah. You got to change it by doing something through the experience, right? The work you've done, you said it, Sean. You can't imagine how you even got where you are. And now the goalpost is moved. It got bigger. because your sense of agency has increased as the result of.
It's true. It's very true, right? And it was intentional, though, Gary. So this show was intentional to do that. So I used this as a leverage to change my behavior and change my perspective so I could see something I couldn't see if I wasn't doing this. Yeah. Right? It changed my mindset.
Yeah. So
it's intentional. It was intentional. Like I knew. And when we talked about it, I said, no, it's 31 days. There's 31 days in May because that will change. Everything will change then for sure. If we only go 2 weeks, it'll kind of be sort of maybe 3 weeks. Okay, we got some change. 31 days, we've got to change. And so it's to change my mindset. I took the action.
So one of the things I say a lot, Sean, to folks is like, ask yourself this. Do you have a compelling goal?
Uh-huh.
Right. And what do we mean by compelling? It's like irresistible. You can't not do it. It has you. You don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So let me ask you a question here, Gary. What's your compelling goal? Let me ask you a question here because this has come up now. You've brought this up before, but then it's come up a couple of times in terms of the importance of the goal, the big idea, whatever it is. And we had Katya Miller, who had a vision 20 years ago. She's still going forward. She didn't know where it would take her. I mean, it was like a vision. She had a vision. And I know some people do within constantly. Probably everybody has visions, but they don't act upon it. The question is, I'm going to move us here. How can people who have a vision, who see a goal, have a compelling goal, but don't act upon it? How do we get them to act upon it? Because it's happening to people. They get a goal, they see an opportunity, they get excited, and then they don't do anything. And so action is like the key differentiator here. Like ideas are open source, execution is proprietary.
Yeah, I get it. It's a really good question, Sean. And I think, a lot of what I've learned comes from the work of Albert Bandura in guided mastery, right?
Yep.
So one of the things, like, I'm going to answer it in two ways. The first way I'm going to answer it is like through a process I call micro experimentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, stop thinking about it as this big, bold, daring thing, right? Break it down to a simple little experiment, right?
Yeah.
That's how you survive and adapt without going. That's how you coax yourself out of your comfort zone. You got the compelling goal, but then you just break it down into baby steps, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that there's a brain hack I want to talk about here, Sean, just relative to that question.
Yeah.
There's a heuristic. It's called an affect heuristic. Like, it's an emotional response. Like, so your mindset reaches into the past to navigate the future, right? So the future looks like the past. You're good to go, right? If it's working for you, keep on doing it, right?
Right.
But it gets us into trouble when the future doesn't look like the past. And so what happens is you contemplate, right? You contemplate like, well, I'm going to take this first step. I got to go talk to a person I never talked to before. I got to step into a role that is counter to my own identity, right? I see myself as X. Therefore, I can't imagine myself behaving as Y.
Right.
So what happens, Sean, you know this, like this thing called the affect heuristic, your brain instantly makes a decision, nope, that's too scary.
Right.
And it shuts down the thought before you can even get to the point where you go, wait a minute, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to go talk to this guy. He's going to say, get the hell out of my office. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Don't ever call me again. Like, you can survive that.
Yeah.
But your brain never even lets you get there. It just shuts it down.
I mean, this is a powerful thing. It's like a protective. It's protecting. The brain thinks it's protection. It thinks, right? And so
it thinks it's protecting you.
One of the things that I started practicing in my 20s was real-time paradigm shifting. It was an experiment. It was micro experimenting. Which meant whenever I wanted to change, for instance, saying I would utilize this and before I said it, I would try to catch it and repackage it, so I'd say something different. And then progressively got more complicated in terms of behaviors. And when I start behaving this way or thinking this way, that I can fix it. It's become something that's really quite remarkable now, because I started when I was 20, 53. It's almost effortless, and I can change anything pretty much, I found, at least so far, by this awareness. But it took probably, 30 years. Oh my gosh, 30 years. And so these micro experiments are important because it's a muscle, right? You're building it, right? And the more you use it, what can people do? So the micro experiment's a great concept if the audience is getting that. But let's say that I am somebody who's never done anything beyond what I've always done, and now I'm not able to do that anymore because the world's changed. And anytime I think of something new, I'm running a scenario. Anytime I think of something new, my brain kicks in and goes, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's not, that'll never work," or whatever. What can someone do to get to the micro, to change, to shift that brain blockage that they have that that prevents them from seeing, oh, wait a minute, maybe if I tried this, it would work, or at least I could try and see what happens. What can someone do to just reduce that barrier, that first judgment that blocks and shuts down things? 'Cause I know people, and I've seen it, and they thought of it, and then they instantly went, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. And it's super subtle, Sean. I mean, it just happens so quickly. You don't even know it happened, right?
Yeah. How do you become aware of it?
I noticed something just, and my wife's in the other room, so I got to speak quietly. But I noticed in our conversations when we run into like a challenge in our life somewhere, I'm much quicker to come up with possible solutions, and she's more likely to shoot them down, where I'm more likely to try. And it's super subtle. It's just super. That's probably because of 25, 30 years as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's a super subtle distinction. I'm just more willing to try a little experiment to see if it works. Right. Now, back to your question. I think another thing, here's what I would do for the person you're describing. I would find a buddy, the buddy system. Like just, like let's say you got to go door to door selling something, knocking on door, and you're like an introvert, like that scares the hell out of you. Yeah. Well, find somebody like a running buddy, somebody to do it with. It's just like there's so much strength in numbers. It helps bolster your sense of agency.
Great idea. It's great.
Right.
That's how I go to banks. I get a buddy to go with me because I don't know. I get a little uncomfortable sometimes in those places, and so this is great. It helps.
Yeah.
Just get somebody to go do it with you.
Yeah, just get someone to go do it with you. It's a simple like baby step, right? But here's the other part of the trick, Sean. I want to come back to, like the goal's got to be compelling. You understand? Because if the thing isn't, it's the compelling nature of the goal that acts like a magnet that pulls you baby step by baby step out of your comfort zone. If the goal isn't compelling, if you're extrinsically motivated by the goal, you're less likely to be doing it.
And so the goal could be to be more entrepreneurial. Like just to be more entrepreneurial could be a good goal to start with, not to start a business, but just to be more valuable and create more value as a human and be more entrepreneurial in my thinking and behavior.
Yeah, find some way to make yourself more useful to more humans.
Yeah, find your way to be more useful to more humans.
Make more useful to more humans, right? Whether it's the volume thing or the value thing, whatever. But figure out how to make, you're talking about baby steps. I remember you know, when I started kind of getting waist deep into this, Sean, in the early 2000s, I knew I was going to have to figure out how to do public speaking, which I had never done. I was terrified of doing. And I'm not making this up. I went to a homeless shelter in Cleveland.
I'm like, okay, well, you've done well.
I went to a homeless shelter every Tuesday morning in Cleveland for like 3 or 4 months and gave talks to homeless dudes. Because it's like, okay, this is an environment where I can practice my craft with a safety net's like I'm only standing, 6 inches off the ground. If I fall, it ain't going to hurt.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that was like an example of like a baby step, right?
But again, I'm going to point out something here, and this is, and there's some people been on the show believe you can teach people certain things, character, right, behavior, and then there's some people that maybe can't. And so you have something unique inside of you to say, you know what, I'm going to go speak. I better go practice. There's a homeless shelter around the corner. I'll just go over there and practice with those. That is just, I think, so, while it's easy for you and you don't even think twice about it, but normal folks on the planet don't do that. And it's like, you got to exercise that muscle where you got to, like, they might have to brainstorm. Oh, where could I practice? What do I do? It's not so quick as it is with you.
Well, Sean, I'm going to push back on this a little bit. Like,
good.
What I figured out how to do is that Venn diagram we talked about last time I checked in with you.
Yeah.
Like, there's 3 spheres, right? There's my natural interests, which I don't really have any choice over. Like, they come on a hard drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And my natural abilities, right? Turns out I have some ability to speak publicly. I can do that well.
Yes.
And then the 3rd sphere is how I can benefit other humans with those skills. So I figured out how to use my unique interests and abilities in a way that benefits other humans. Any other human can do that. They're going to be different interests and different abilities, right? Mm-hmm. But just be careful how we attribute. I'm going to push back really hard on the people that think entrepreneurs are just sort of innately born with some rare abilities, right? This is social psychology 101. I've looked at the research here, Sean. Mm-hmm. The big 5 personality traits, whatever. They don't adequately explain entrepreneurial behavior. There's much more to it than personality traits. Mm-hmm. And I'm convinced from 25 years of research that non-entrepreneurial behavior is learned.
So we're all born entrepreneurs. The challenge is staying one.
That's exactly right, Sean. Right? We're born naturally creative. We're hardwired to solve problems for other humans. I mean, you think about it. You cannot access the most potent form of human motivation unless you're doing something that benefits other humans. That's not my moral perspective. That's established in the psychological literature on motivation. Right? And most people don't get to do that.
This is
a job every day.
So
most people never tap into it.
I'm sorry, Gary. One second. So this goes back to what you talked about, this factory system we have for schools, because it's teaching us out. It's teaching it out of us then as we go through this factory that then positions us to be employees that sit and do good things every day and don't ask a lot of questions because just do your job.
Yeah.
Wow.
Did you have a question? I'm sorry, I missed it. I thought it was a question in that.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. I wanted to bring it back because
that's it.
I'm trying to navigate through this because we're all born entrepreneurs. The challenge is staying one. Let's just say that's true. And I think Picasso, we're all born artists. The challenge is staying one. Same.
That's right. That's right on. So the entrepreneurial spirit.
As parents, though, like parents out there have a responsibility to raise their children in a way that helps them become more independent, more give them 100% agency, which means it's counter to how we do it now, which is we send their kids off to school, and there's a lot of people having challenges because their kids at home. How do I work with kids at home? So it's almost like become daycare. Schools become daycare. How do we shift this with parents? Because it seems to me that's a starting place to really like create massive waves of shift in the future. Because I'll stop.
So no, that's good, Sean. I mean, I'm following like Jonathan Haidt's stuff. I've been to a couple of his lectures, and everywhere in nature you see this. Like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Yeah.
And what we need is a compelling goal. And so, as a parent, what we need to do is when you see the child sort of latch into like an interest, is encourage them to go deep. Because you also got to understand, like, school's not going to do it. School's going to try to make your kid into like every other kid, right? So I think that's part of the understanding. But like, the extent that we try to remove all the barriers for our children is the extent that we undermine their ability to develop the attitudes and skills necessary to adapt and thrive in the world, right?
Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, I'm fearful about this. And what Haidt's theory, which I kind of buy into, is that, in the 90s in the U.S., when a 24-hour news cycle became a thing, and Adam Walsh thing was going on. You remember that the kid was like abducted and murdered or whatever. It's like 24. Yeah. And parents are just so fearful of Haidt in his lecture here at Case Western. He said, like, raise your hand. Like, how many of you, how old were you? He asked the students in the course, how old were you when you had your first unsupervised play? And these kids are saying like 10, 12.
Right. And,
Sean, you and I were out in the woods with a sharp stick at age 5.
It's true.
Right? I mean, I'm literally, I'm not trying to sound like an old dude, but like I was literally like walking to school a mile when I was in like kindergarten.
It's probably true, yeah.
It's just like we don't realize those things. A really good book to read here is this like Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb.
Totally. I'm familiar.
Right? Yeah. It's a phenomenal book. But again, Sean, it's really the compelling goal. So, I asked the question earlier, like, do you have a compelling goal? You can look up the word compelling, but it's irresistible. It's pulling you.
Yeah. You're
not being pushed. You're being pulled, right?
You're in a flow. I call it flow, where I'm in a stream. And
it is flow. That's what it's called. Optimal engagement. You're optimally engaged, right? You're constantly being challenged above your skill level. You're constantly doing things that are on the edges, the fringes of your comfort zone, because the goal is so compelling.
Yeah, you're willing to put yourself at risk, not physically or from a death perspective, but just at risk in terms of your own human person.
So the flip side of the question is like, what happens to a human in the absence of a compelling goal?
Stagnation.
Let's go, man. Stagnation. How about disengage from work?
Yeah, how about apathy.
Social media, stupid television, you just sports, addiction, whatever. You just like it's like Nietzsche said it, like he who has a why to live for can endure almost anyhow. That's the point that I really.
What do you think it is that causes? We're way over time here, Gary, but this is great conversation. And what do you think it is that causes so many people to become just complacent with life and couch potatoes and not not pursue anything other than just their job, look forward to the weekends as we talked about, and why are so many people gravitate towards that? Why?
It's an interesting question, Sean, and you reminded me of a thing I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say, like, if you live for holidays and weekends, your shit is broken. Right?
Yeah.
But this is a good way to end this conversation, Sean, and I'm going to talk a little bit about something called the Hope Circuit. And this is sort of latest research from Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology. Seligman is best known for his work with learned helplessness, right?
Okay. Learned helplessness. Okay.
Yeah, and so he did these experiments back in the 60s. He put dogs in cages, right? The first group of dogs, they put them in a cage, and they administer a shock to the dog through the floor of the cage, but there's a little lever that the dog can manipulate, and the lever stops the shock. So in the first group of dogs, the adversity is escapable, perceived to be escapable. You with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Second group of dogs, they put them in the cage, same shock, same lever, only the lever doesn't do anything to ameliorate the shock. So for the second group of dogs, the shock is inescapable, perceived to be. Then they put the dogs in this thing he calls a shuttle box. It's a big cage with a little wall in the middle, a little tiny wall they can easily jump over. And they put them on one side of the cage and they administer the shock. And the first group of dogs, they just go boom, they jump right over the wall to go to the other side of the cage. The second group of dogs, they administer the shock and they just lie down. Right? Even though they watched the first group of dogs jumping over the wall. That's, what he was calling learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Okay, this is some deep stuff here.
This is like an elephant who gets tied with a little rope,
okay. So let's talk about the Hope Circuit. Well, what Seligman just revealed in his memoir called The Hope Circuit is they found the circuitry in the brain. Your subconscious mind, based on the past, when you find yourself in a situation that might be unpleasant, like let's say a job you hate, right?
Yeah.
Your brain decides based on the past and decides without any real conscious awareness on your behalf. Your brain makes a decision whether this is escapable or inescapable.
Mm-hmm.
And it flips a switch neurologically in the brain and starts to suppress or produce serotonin. Okay?
Okay.
So if your brain determines, and this, what Seligman has learned is that learned helplessness is not learned. It's a default mechanism from evolution.
Mm-hmm.
We're born helpless. We learn to be efficacious, like agency is learned. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the Hope Circuit, let me get on this. Your brain decides whether your circumstance is escapable or inescapable. And it makes that decision without your awareness.
Okay.
And it either closes or opens the Hope Circuit. If it closes the Hope Circuit, you then start to focus on how to tolerate the situation. If it believes it, and so from an evolutionary perspective, what's happening is your brain has decided conserve energy, right? It suppresses fight or flight and amps up the anxiety. That's the closed circuit, right? It's inescapable.
Mm-hmm.
If your brain perceives it's escapable, it opens the circuit. It now starts to produce the energy, the enthusiasm, the mechanism in the brain to start finding solutions to the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's practiced, it's learned.
It's learned, right?
And I overcome this block that wants you to conserve energy. and get comfortable with the situation as best as possible.
Correct. I got this quote. I teed this up to this conversation. This is from Seligman's book. We are born helpless. We learn control. Early experiences of control immunize us against the ravages of uncontrollability later in life. Okay? So what does school teach us? We don't have control.
Right.
Someone else is telling us what to learn, when to learn. There's the bell. Boom, 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 boom. And it shuffles us right into a system that tells us we don't have control. Do this thing. Here's your little biscuit we give you at the end of the week. You know, it's super subtle. It's not like I'm in a cage being shocked. I'm not in the Hanoi Hilton, you know, but I'm in a situation that so what do? I go buy jet skis on credit. Right? Sean, you might have experienced it. You ever talk to people like you're in a mix of people you're not familiar with? And you're talking about like optimistic things, and you hear people like just like shooting the idea down like one after the other. You've been around that? That's the hope circuit's shut.
Yeah.
That's somebody it's shut. And this is fascinating to me. I mean,
there's a lot of people out there like this. What's interesting, Gary, and what this brings up for me, and as you're talking, I'm processing, and my mother's on Sundays, Insights with Sean's mom, and it's been really, really just, they're awesome. They're awesome segments, and it's my mother, and it makes it all the more special. But when I grew up, I was removed from somewhere around 12 schools by the time I was a sophomore in high school. 12. Mm-hmm. And what I realized when I was having a conversation with my mother, and what I'm realizing now with you in this conversation is, those were intentional. I couldn't control this environment. They thought they could control me. Oh, well, I'll just get kicked out of it, right? And it was a protection mechanism, right? So somewhere unconsciously at the time, right? Because I'm a child. I don't remember totally, but I can look upon it now, and there was a pattern there that is like you're self-ejecting, right? You're getting out of something that's not safe or good for you. At least I thought it wasn't, and it probably wasn't. And I'm glad it worked out the way it did. But But even when you're a child, you have those mechanisms, and then thankfully I had a mother who fought for me. But you could see, and I could see how other parents would go, "You're a bad child," and then make it worse, right? And then just crush their will.
Bust out the Ritalin, man. Bust out the Ritalin.
Drugs even now, right? So thank you, drugs. I was on Ritalin for a while.
Yeah. In the in the early 20th century, like educators like bragged about the discipline, the spankings and the knuckle ruler and all those things. And then they figured out Ritalin. They stopped using corporal punishment. They started using. I'm talking to a guy the other day.
The prisoners are all drugged up. They don't have to hire as many security guards. They're drug addicts when they come out, if they weren't when they went in.
I was talking to a prison psychologist on Sunday. Good friend of mine. He spent his whole career as a psychologist in maximum security prisons. He's talking to a teacher, like a seventh grade teacher. And the guy was bragging about the fact that 15 out of 18 kids in his class were on like either Ritalin or I forgot the other one. It's like, here's the thing, Sean. Humans are all, like every human, just like every other mammal on the planet, is born with both the desire and the capability to learn everything they need to learn in order to adapt and thrive in their environment. Right? And where do you see this? Where is this abundantly evident? It's in the work you and I are doing. You see it every day in your work. You see people of modest intellect, of modest means, learning amazing things.
And running.
Without the guidance of a formal teacher or some kind of formal learning program.
That's right.
You and I are in the business of lecturing birds on how to fly.
True.
I mean, that's it. All educators are.
I think herding cats is another one of those things, I would say.
Right. But like educators think like humans are just like stupid. They'll just like wander off into traffic if we don't tell them exactly what to do and how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, and why to do it. Right?
Right.
It's like, that's the thing, but you never hear of these examples in the academic conversation. You never hear the examples of these underdogs who are teaching themselves amazing things on their own.
I mean, I think that we're going to have to wind down here, Gary, but this has been a great segment. And I think that overall, as just to recap, it's the compelling goal, which is the motivation to develop the micro experiments, small steps that you take to build up that muscle to then be able to get closer to the compelling goal, and then overlay that life is not supposed to be easy, and it's going to be a journey and an adventure, and it's going to test you as you go. But the small steps and the micro experiments will make it easier, working towards the compelling vision, and helping as many humans as possible.
Well, that's how the goal is. You got to do that for the goal to be compelling. It's baked into the formula.
Yeah.
But just to close with that, Sean, if you want to understand why entrepreneurs are so curious, so creative, such critical thinkers, self-directed, lifelong learners, so resourceful, so resilient, and go on and on about with these characteristics, stop looking at their personality traits. And look at the nature of the goal they're pursuing and their relationship to that goal, and you'll perfectly understand the behavior.
Right.
The entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. This goes back to
last thing I'm going to say.
Or others. I'm not trying to use them as like the ultimate example, because they're not. But they do have compelling goals that are 500 years out there. His goal is 500 years.
That's it.
Right? He's got a compelling goal. I'm going to be alive. Maybe he'll freeze himself like some of the Disney folks have done. But for cryogen, so they can come back to life maybe another time. But I think that this is really like, it's varying degrees, and that's like the most extreme. And your compelling goal may be to transform and make your home life easier, or buy whatever you're going to buy. Right?
Could be to pay the bills.
Pay
start out as simple.
A compelling goal.
Exactly.
And so
exactly.
It doesn't have to be that large, but I use that as an example of somebody who he didn't get there. He's just like us. He took small steps. It's not like he got there and there he is now. But he started small. He was just us, and he's an immigrant on top of that, so he had even more challenges.
Yeah.
And so you got to take the first step and do those micro experiments. This is the key.
Yeah. Sean, I think it's just important for everyone to remember that the entrepreneurial spirit is the human spirit. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And it's the compelling goal that sort of unleashes the potential. And that's the work you and I are both doing, man. Like I said, we're brothers from another mother. So I'm
no question.
Any opportunity to hang out with Sean Griffin, man, I'm there.
Well, thanks. Any opportunity to hang out with Gary Schoeniger, I'm there too. Gary, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Very much appreciate it.
31 Days to Pat It 2. We'll be making an announcement soon on our next step. So I look forward to seeing you on future shows we do.
Love it. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you so much.
Peace.
Woo! What a show, everybody. That's some Pat It 2 in there. What's your compelling goal? What is it? What is your goal? Think about it, write it down, and then figure out some micro steps you can take to move that goal forward. Trust me, it'll change your life. It'll get you to where you want to go, and it'll make you a better human and support more people on this planet. Before we leave, our winner for a free one-on-one coaching with me, we've been doing these now for a little while, is Berg M. Berg M. Congratulations on receiving one-on-one coaching with me. I'll visually guide you to a better future and help you identify or help evolve your compelling goal. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This has been a great show. That's the check it off here. Day 28 down, 3 more days to go. I wonder what's next. See you tomorrow. Same Pat It 2 time, same Pat It 2 place.
You got to never ever give up. Never ever
Believe in yourself and you'll go far.